This webinar is jointly hosted by Matrix Communications, a leading European language service provider, and Canton MT, a cloud-based custom machine translation solution provider. Today's panelists are Christian Taube from Matrix Communications and Brian Coyle, Chief Commercial Officer at Canton MT. Both speakers have a wealth of industry experience. They will discuss how Matrix and Canton MT partnership delivers a high-quality, scalable solution that increases translation productivity and supports engineering and automotive terminology standards. Christian will kick off the presentation, where he'll speak for 20 minutes about the need for and the potential of machine translation in automotive and engineering industry. He will then go on to show with example how Matrix and Canton MT partnership benefits our clients. Brian will demonstrate through another case study how effective translation automation can benefit the automotive and engineering sector. We have added 2 case studies as handouts. Please feel free to have a look at them at your leisure. Finally, we'll open the floor for a question and answer session at the end. Please feel free to direct your question to either of the panelists. We'll now hand over to Christian for him. Hi, Christian. Hi, Christian, you're online. Thanks so much.
Palumi, thank you. Thank you for the introduction, Palumi. Thank you, Brian and Palumi, for having me as a presenter today, and welcome everybody to the webinar. I am going to talk about managing TMs for engineering and automotive translation as a Canton partner. I will walk you through approximately 10 slides, and I welcome your question afterwards for the Q&A session that we have. Please fire off the questions into the chat at any time, and I will pick them up afterwards. A few words about my company and about me. I'm the guy on the right with no hair. I have worked in the translation industry since just about 1997 as a project manager, as a technology lead, and as a consultant to enterprise-sized companies. And I co-founded Matrix Communications in 2006, so we're just past our 10th birthday now. We are a medium-sized LSP, language service provider, with approximately 50 employees right now. Approximately 9 million euros of sales. We are based in Munich, and we service a wide range of industry and service sector clients in Germany and throughout Europe, among them leading clients in automotive and in engineering. We have actively been using MT since 2011, and we have been partners of Canton MT actually since shortly after the company was founded in 2012, and I think we trained the first engines with Tony's team in late 2012 and have been using it ever since then. We like to combine technologies into pipelines that increase our efficiency in translation. That is why we have chosen Canton MT. However, I would also like to say that we do classical translation. We are an LSP. If the customer wants a translation without MT, or due to some reason we cannot deliver an MT solution to them, we will do that as well. But our focus today is on the MT solution with Canton MT. I will talk a bit about the rationale behind using MT. What's the status of MT today? Basically, and this may be a surprise, I would go so far and say that everybody has used MT today. Everybody has used Google Translate. Everybody has used Microsoft Translator. Everybody is using translation in Facebook. This one actually is funny. It's 2 days old, and the English translation is the exact opposite of what it says in German. So that gives us already some indication as to why MT needs human intervention. So we can say that many people are interested in MT. However, in an industrial context, it is not quite as simple. The use cases are very differentiated. Requirements are much higher due to legal and compliance constraints in an industrial environment. And we find that few enterprises are ready to really invest into complex solutions. We talk to lots of clients who are looking at the situation, who are evaluating things, and we are interested in lowering the threshold for these buyers. And this is why we cooperate with Canton MT. So what the market expects is a tangible and transparent MT service at a fair price point. And what the market is lacking is a sustained role model for everyday experience for exactly this. So what do we look out for? That is the question. The business case context for why we use MT is very simply put this. It's a very simple figure that gives you an idea of total cost of ownership in a classical approach and total cost of ownership in a classical approach where we use MT. In a classical approach, we spend a lot of money on manual translation and on quality assurance. In the MT approach, we try to cut the translation cost by X number of %, and that's the business question. How much can we achieve there? And we focus a lot on data preparation and on quality assurance to achieve the same level of quality as before. But what we want to disrupt is the classical cost structure that people are used to work in. What is important and what is sometimes not taken into account is that there is more than one way to use MT. Just think back to the slide before. You can use it on an everyday basis using Google Translate if you're willing to take that risk. We believe that MT can be a productivity tool that allows service providers to translations faster with the same quality as in a standard translation framework. Of course, machine translation could also be used for gisting a text without any post-editing at all, something that translation buyers sometimes tend to forget, but that can be useful in a business scenario. I'm just mentioning it for completeness sake. In the presentation today, we will not actually talk about gisting translations after this point, but we will talk about a full-scale translation pipeline, including quality assurance so that human-level quality is achieved. Where do we see potential uses for MT as Matrix? As I said before, we use it as a productivity aid when translating texts in organizations that have the capability to exert some level of control over their authoring guidelines. We want to look, we see potential in texts that have a high degree of in-domain specificity. We see potential where there is well-documented terminology, and this is particularly the case in engineering and in automotive industries, where compliance constraints require the terminology is very well documented for both user documentation and workshop documentation. And we see potential for MT where buyers have a well-established translation memory process in-house or at their service providers. We find that this potential can be realized in many sorts of technical documentation, user documentation, workshop documentation, service workshop documentation that has high volumes, fast turnarounds where MT can be used usefully. User documentation I mentioned. We also see that we can use it to some extent in financial reporting, because that requires very well documented terminology and very, very well structured language. And that actually is good for machine translation use as well. And we see it in a lot of catalog text, again, something that happens a lot in engineering and in automotive. I will talk a bit more about each of these points further down the line. To our case study. This slide reflects the case study that was sent out to you in the invitation to the webinar, and I'm going to talk a bit about what we're doing there and what we're doing in the background on this slide and the next one. So our customer is a German engineering company with worldwide presence and a wide variety of high-tech products and service solutions that are deployed worldwide and that need regular service documentation to be supplied to workshops in the individual countries. We are now doing out of German, English, Spanish, French, Italian, Dutch, Danish, Norwegian, and also Chinese, with Canton MT, with full post-editing to a human quality level. And we are planning to introduce further language pairs into the pipeline as the project moves along. Our translation platform is SDL Trado Studio 2014, or now 2015. And we like to highlight that we work in the usual translation environment for the translators who are now post-editors, combining the translation memory and the Canton MT output, basically enabling translators to work in the usual environment with the output so that they can select what's best. They can select the best quality for a given translation text. We find that the productivity improves significantly. You may ask by how much. The answer to that is it depends on the language pair, it depends on the project. Across the board, we can see productivity increases somewhere between 20 and 50% per language to achieve human level quality before delivery to the client. What do we do when we build an MT engine in Cantan? And this is where it gets technical. Forgive me for that if you're not that much of a technical person. If you are not that much of a technical person, I will be happy to answer questions about this afterwards in non-technical terms. I can do that, but I wanted to put in a bit of technology here for the technology guys. We do use customer-specific translation memories as input. We don't use less customer-specific corpora for input, although that is definitely an option that Cantan has. Cantan just recently, very recently, I think it was last week, released a feature called Cantan Fleet, where you can have off-the-shelf stock engines for specific markets that are pre-trained with, say, automotive technology or with terminology or with financial terminology or with a range of other markets that you can cater for. However, we do not use one of these. We use specific translation memories that we have worked on for years. We use customer-specific terminology that's held in databases, and we make sure that this is actually present in the TMs. There's a tendency in the markets to not look at your legacy translation memories too hard, and we find that that is a mistake if you're going into MT. Very often, translation memory is used as, if you will, a data dump. You just put stuff in there and you hope that it gets recycled eventually. However, if you're going to use TM as training material in your MT initiative, you want to make sure that the TM is actually good and reliable. So you want to invest into maintaining your TM well and into managing the terminology in there, also into fixing old mistakes if you find them. That actually pays off in the long run. We do edit our raw translation memory input for the machine translation purpose. And there are several preparatory steps that we do in-house, and that can also be done automated by Cantan. We eliminate non-aligned segments, so we work on the segment level, and we make sure that these segments actually correspond to each other in content. We remove empty segments, we remove empty segments that are too short or too long on either side. A lot of this happens before we actually import the memory into Cantan. However, Cantan also helps us with a lot of the functionality they have to clean TMs so that they yield the optimized input. We normalize capitalized words, we normalize acronyms. We try to work with as little acronyms as we can because these are sometimes very good false friends. However, where we cannot live without acronyms, we run linguistic checks for consistency throughout the TM, and we run terminology checks. Again, this goes back to my second point up there. You do want to make sure that your terminology is good and that it is present in the TM. That will help your throughput later on a lot. Our TM input sizes range from 100,000 to 700,000 segments, so these are relatively big TMs. In terms of words, you would be looking at 800,000 words to somewhere northwards of 4 million segments per language. That's a lot, and it may be asking too much of smaller companies, smaller buyers that do not have this size of memory for one specific language pair. And I do want to mention that we have built very, very small engines too. Outside of this case study, the smallest engine that I have built was based on just about 20,000 segments, 150,000 words. The reason why this worked is because it was very specific. As a matter of fact, the way it worked was that the translation was based, the source document was based on a translation into English that we had provided to that customer. The customer further developed the document in English based on his own guidelines, based on our previous translation, and about 2 years down the road requested a translation into German. So we just reversed the direction of the TM, fed it into the Cantan engine, a very small, relatively small amount of segments, just about 20,000, and we got an efficiency gain there of 70% in translation and post-editing. So the message here is specificity in your translation memory and in your terminology works, and it can give you a good success. And then we use the Cantan feature called PEX, post-editing XML. These are automated post-editing rules that help you replace fixed regular expressions in your source text that the MT engine may not actually be good at, and replaces these automatically. And this is an extremely useful knowledge base that you build up there. We have built literally hundreds of rules over the time that we have changed and rechanged, where regular expressions help us to get the work done faster in post-editing. What are some of the success factors that we have identified for success with MT? You do want to make sure that you manage expectations on all sides of the equation. You need the buy-in of your internal language department. You need the buy-in of your language services provider if you're a buyer. You need the buy-in of your buyer if you're a language service provider. If you're going to suggest MT to them, you need to make clear that it is to save costs in the long run, but it requires an investment in the beginning. You want to make sure that you have the buy-in of your translators who may never have touched machine translation before and who may have certain reasons to push back on it. These types of things you want to manage before you actually jump right into the project. You want to identify suitable text types. I was talking a bit about this earlier. Suitable text types are texts that have a degree of redundancy, that are very technical, that are where you really can work with the segment level. You do not need to break up the segment level. That is why it is often said that, for example, marketing texts and website texts where you actually market products are not as suitable for translation as more technical texts. And we find that this is mostly true in our experience. I have heard in the market that people are now actually also looking at certain marketing texts for machine translation as well. You do want to work with your authors to optimize the source text. The quality of the source we find is very important to MT. It's a matter of, you cannot really expect MT or no MT to be the translation any better than the source if the source is already not good. Low quality data in the source, data that have not been spell checked, data where the terminology in your company has not been used, data that do not adhere to style guides in your company, where you feed those data into an MT process, you will not get good quality. You want to work with a more or less controlled source. You want to have guidelines on what style to use. For example, you want to control your terminology already at the source. I already stated this before, but I want to repeat it again here. This is really very, very important that you look at your terminology very strongly. Use wise investment into your TMs. Use suitable tools to maintain them. Look at past legacy stuff. Decide if you want to get rid of it or if you want to maintain it. If you want to maintain it good. Make sure that any changes in your corporate language that you make actually make it into the TM. Do not just let the TM sit there with years-old segments. These will not help you in the long run, neither when leveraging from the TM nor in machine translation. Train post-editors. Translators can be post-editors. As of current status, there is not really formal training for post editors, although that is beginning to pick up. Translation schools do not teach a lot of it still, but that is slowly changing. However, you want to make sure that you train your own post editors, because again, that goes back to the first point. That's the best way to guarantee their buy-in into what you're doing with MT. And finally, don't be afraid to fail. You may fail. We failed. We failed with certain language pairs, for example, because we did not take into account that they are morphologically too rich for MT. Just reverse and try again, or let it lie on the ground and pick up a different thread. Just as an example, we tried German into Russian, and that proved a failure because our TM was not in good shape, and we just do not manage the language well at this point in time. This may change in the future. We will revisit it, but we got honest feedback from the post editors. We got honest feedback from the customer, and we just stopped it. That's fine. It can happen. What benefits are we gaining? We have turnaround times significantly reduced. The translator throughput is increased. As I said before, it depends a lot on what project and what language pair you're looking at, but there's some significant percentage to be gained there, which again, of course, leads to significant cost reductions. And finally, again, I want to highlight that the workflow, the quality result, the workflow result that we submit to the client retains the same high quality standard. And you keep in mind there that quality is the result of a process rather than an unchangeable property of a text. In some situations in a real world scenario, there is not really a need for ready for publishing quality. Some light post editing and associated good enough quality may be quite sufficient, but you want to be sure that good enough is defined very well. I want to highlight that in a language service provider scenario, QA is of course always part of the service we sell, and it should be defined with the end customer. Quality should be defined. Quality assurance is included in the translation pipeline, and we guarantee a desired level of quality to all translations independently of how they were produced, MT or no MT. In summary, why are we working with Cantan? This is a rundown of the reasons. There's a fully automated system training. It's completely offloaded onto Cantan's infrastructure. They do a certain level of automatic data preprocessing and cleansing in the Cantan Gentry framework. That helps us a lot. The translation step is fully automated. It can be remote controlled through an API. There are post-editing rules that aid us in translation. There are certain features in Cantan, I just mentioned Cantan Watch, gap analysis, and reject report that help us to manage quality assessment of the engines. And finally, there's no maintenance and infrastructure. There's just a flat monthly fee that helps us in having a easily calculable risk for our MT initiative. That brings me to the end of the presentation. Thank you very much. And if you like, I am available to take your questions. And also, I think, Ryan, you have additional material that you will talk about.
Thank you, Christian. That was a really interesting presentation. And yes, we'll take the question and answer session at the end of the presentation after Brian. Thank you. Brian, would you like to take over?
Sure.
We'll now take control of the screen, Christian. Thank you.
Click on me here.
Sorry.
Make a presenter. There we go. Show my screen.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Polly. Thank you, Christian. Thanks for that. That was a really good view and description of the importance of managing TMs. And obviously, you quoted from a particular case study. So what I'd like to do is just explain a little bit more about how Canton MT works, and just very briefly to touch on a couple more case studies, just to show that that your success wasn't necessarily a one-off, but that there are other applications in engineering and automotive that have used machine translation and that have been very successful in so doing. So if I can just crack on and tell you a little bit about Canton MT. So it's a statistical machine translation platform as opposed to a rules-based translation platform. It's cloud-based, which makes it very, very scalable. We have over 700 servers now. And statistical machine translation is traditionally, it's very computer hungry. So it requires that kind of scale of infrastructure in order to function properly and to function well without degradation. And you know, the cloud infrastructure has been one of the facilitating factors in the successful development of statistical machine translation. It's inexpensive to operate. Gone are the days, as I said, gone are the days of having to invest upfront significant amounts in infrastructure and in software licenses and so on. It's a simple subscription fee. It's a fusion of TM and machine translation and rules. So we have a built-in TM called Canton Recall, which actually can do a lot of the heavy lifting in the whole Canton MT automation process. And there are also some rules that will, as Christian mentioned, such as post-editing rules, that can really speed up the resolution of repetitive errors and so on in post-editing. So, I mean, all of this means that, you know, with Canton MT you get, you know, really high speed, up to 6 million words an hour to train and to translate, and high quality translations at that. So the idea was simply to put customization of engines, machine translation engines, the improvement of those engines and the deployment of those engines into our clients' hands, and to make it as simple as possible. Traditionally, I suppose machine translation, it has been seen as being expensive or as being complicated to operate. So we've tried to make it as simple as possible. The result is that we have now over 9,000 engines on Canton MT on the platform. We've uploaded over 380 billion source words, training words. So those would be obviously training words from translation memories and so on that go into training Canton MT engines on our clients' behalf or for our clients. And we've translated over 6.5 billion words. So it's been hugely successful in a very short space of time. In addition, you don't want to go, that's me there, but you don't want to go into that right now. What we've managed to do is to create quite a community of Canton MT users, including some direct organizations, direct companies there, as well as some major LSPs such as Matrix and so on. So just to touch briefly on some of the case studies then. The first one really is with a client. Again, they're a language service provider who was operating for an automotive client, and what they needed to do was to produce a manual from English to Dutch, and they wanted to run a proof of concept to validate the kind of return on investment that they could get. And then they wanted to have a solution that was very, very scalable, because they needed to translate up to 50 manuals per year. I think the average is about a million words per manual, technical manual. And also what they really wanted to do, what was very important, is that they wanted to integrate into their existing localization workflow. They didn't want to have to change their workflow in order to incorporate machine translation. So they had already built an in-house MT solution, this particular language service provider, but they had found that the output of that was very, very poor. So what they wanted to do was to improve their machine translation output so that they could improve overall translator productivity. So what they were using was a CAT tool that they were using was MemoQ, which I'm sure people are familiar with. And as I said, they really wanted, it was very important that they had seamless integration into MemoQ. So the result was that we successfully integrated into MemoQ. They built their engine and they ran the proof of concept, and they improved productivity by 25%. They employed a number of tools. As Christian mentioned, one of the most useful tools in this case was the post-editing automation tool, the PEX tool, which really helped reduce post-editing effort because it eliminated those repetitive errors. Reduced project turnaround time. It improved the quality of translations that they were getting as opposed to their own in-house machine translation system. And what they found then is that they had a really nice, smooth and seamless workflow, including their existing MemoQ platform, including Canton MT, and that was scalable to meet their future requirements. Just to show you here how kind of seamless that is, this is a screenshot from the MemoQ tool. You can see that here we have the option to connect to the Canton MT API connector. You have an API token, you put that into the field, and you get an instant connection into Canton MT. It really is that simple and straightforward and seamless. And we have a number of connectors with a number of different CAT tools that all work in a similar way. The next case study is a slightly different application. So this is a company called Chrome Data based in the United States. And what's interesting about this company is that they provide vehicle descriptions. They're a vehicle description service for the automotive industry in the United States. And the vehicle descriptions that they provide are standard descriptions for literally thousands and thousands of, tens of thousands of vehicle makes and models. And they provide them to over 6,000 websites in the US and over 17,000 dealerships, who can then use these prepackaged descriptions for their websites and for their vehicle descriptions and so on. And the challenge for them was to, the objective that they wanted to achieve was to translate into Mexican Spanish and Canadian French, because they wanted to expand their service to those locales. Again, the focus was on translation, productivity and speed. Now, what was interesting about this particular platform is that they didn't have an off-the-shelf CAT tool. They had their own internal localization platform, which they had built many, many years ago. And they used a third-party developer to build this for them. So it was essentially like their own self-developed and customized CAT tool. However, that wasn't a problem at all. And again, using the Canton API, we were able, in fact, they built their own connector, and they were able to build a seamless connection into Canton itself. So the result was, again, that they were able to increase translator productivity. So they found that with Canton MT, they were able to get translation post-editing volumes of up to just below 4,500 words per day. So which is quite significant, and obviously they were really very pleased with that, and have continued to use Canton MT. Again, the post-editing automation tool was very useful in that process, and they were able to reduce their project time, their turnaround time, and indeed their project costs. So both of these case studies are available. You can get more detail in the handouts. But what they demonstrate really is that there's a number of different ways to integrate your translation memories into the production of Canton MT machine translation and so on. So the conclusions really is that we feel, and I think what Christian was alluding to as well in his presentation, is that technology is now very much at the forefront of his workflows, and indeed obviously all of our clients' workflows. It's becoming very much the norm. And that introducing this kind of automated translation productivity can deliver real benefits. So from anything from 25% up to 50% has been Christian's experience, up to 70% in the case of Chrome data. So we feel very strongly that it's important not to ignore this, that to embrace this kind of technological change. And that the management of translation memories, if handled properly, as Christian has illustrated, certainly should not be a barrier to employing automation workflows. But in fact, good TMs and good TM management can really deliver benefits on the other end of that process. So that's kind of a summary of the kind of case studies from my end. So I guess I'll thank you very much for taking the time to listen, and thank you for taking the time to listen to Christian. And I'll hand over to Polly now. Polly, to see if we have any questions.
Thanks, Brian. Thank you so much. Yes, we already have questions, and if you guys have any more questions, please feel free to type them on the questions chat bar. Thank you.
Okay.
So the first question here is probably, Christian, you'd like to answer this question. You mentioned significant cost savings. Can you put a number to that?
Yeah, I was trying to answer some of that during the presentation. The cost savings obviously are a function of the efficiency gain that you can have in post editing. The Canton output. I was indicating during my presentation that we, depending on the project and depending on the language, it could be anywhere between 20 and 50%. In isolated cases, we have gone as high as 70 as well, as indicated by Brian in that other case study. Generally, we find that the saving in languages that are a bit closer to German are higher than in others, or languages that are less syntactically sensitive, if you will. So Chinese actually is pretty good in that, surprisingly. That surprised us as well. We got as high as 50% there. French, Spanish, and Italian, and say, for example, Portuguese, which we also did, are always interesting and challenging. But we do have productivity gains there. These are more in the 20 to 30% range going out of German. And with English, it varies. English and German are related, but not enough. German is an odd and strange language, as some of the listeners may know. As a source language in particular, that goes back again to the point where you want to control your source. But again, it could be 20, 30% with accompanying cost savings there.
All right. Thanks, Christian. We actually have another question for you right there. You were earlier highlighting that there is knowledge of the target language needed. Can you confirm that this is the best use of Canton MT only for languages that you have in-house knowledge for?
No. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, please go ahead. I was wondering if you want the question again. Thanks.
Yeah. If that refers to, I'll assume that this refers to an LSP context where an LSP post edits text on behalf of a client and offshores some of that post editing work to, say, freelancers or anyway out of house people that work for them. And my answer to that is no, it is not limited to that. It certainly helps because you have an easier time training translators as post editors that have not been post editors before if they're in-house. However, I want to say that it is quite feasible if the external freelancer is willing to adopt new technology to work with that as well. We have done that, and it proves to be a relatively small issue. again, if you as an LSP can take care of the buy-in of this external person. Most external process editors that we work with are very curious people. They like to work with new technology. They like to work on this. They have no difficulty in highlighting issues to us. We try to work on these issues. This is a model that works for us at least. So my answer to that is it is quite feasible to work with external personnel there. Great question, though.
Thank you. Thanks, Christian. The next question is the translation solution software also applicable in case of non-technical and non-automotive content? For example, would it be relevant for tax law content? What about the translation quality in other industry sectors? Do you offer any trial access for this? Brian, would you like to?
Okay, so thank you for that question. That's a great question. In actual fact, I mean, we have lots of experience in other domains, and particularly if the domain that you mentioned here, which is kind of the legal domain, we have experience in that. We also have experience in the financial domain, as well as IT. We have case studies where, you know, the same level of productivity gains are achieved in post-editing as have been illustrated today. So absolutely, the same kind of success can be achieved in other domains, and we've experienced that. And indeed, I can send on some case studies as well if that's required. In terms of quality, I mean, one of our particular successes relates to the e-commerce sector. So we have an e-commerce platform, a global brand, and they're translating millions of product descriptions each year with Canton MT. And the quality, they've got such refined engines now through, first of all, the successful use of a large amount of training data in the first instance, but also through regular retraining of their engines and management of their engines, that they've got such a high level of quality now that they are actually translating and publishing that output directly to their website, to their web store, without any human intervention, without any human post-editing. So, you know, that's a particular application. That's very, very highly refined and highly developed. It uses highly structured source data for translation, but it works really well for them, and it's very, very successful. So that's a kind of an indication of the kind of quality that is achievable. In terms of trial access for Canton MT, we don't actually offer you know, a free kind of unfettered trial, because we find that it doesn't necessarily work very well for either the trialist or for us. But what we do offer is a very easy onboarding process and training process to allow you to get the very, very best out of Canton MT, and that's what we find is the most successful. And I'd be delighted to talk to you about that afterwards, anybody who's interested. So please feel free to contact me about that afterwards.
All right, thank you, Brian. And there's one more question, and this will probably be the last question that we can take today. Do you recommend any CAT tool which works best with Canton MT? You mentioned MemoQ in the presentation. Okay, so no, in fact, you know, MemoQ is obviously one of the tools that we work. We also work with Trados Studio, as Christian mentioned. We also work with MemSource very successfully with connectors into MemSource, and as I've shown through the Chrome Data case study, our API means that it's very, very easy to connect any CAT tools and, you know, most, you know, content management systems and so on, and directly into Canton MT. So that's what makes that's a great thing about our software and its ability to integrate.
Yeah, I can underscore that and confirm that from my point of view. It's good. It's a good practice to be as cut tool agnostic as you can be when you select an MT platform for yourself. I mean, Cantan has the API; it connects to a lot of things. If you use Trados or Memsos or something else, it doesn't really matter. It may matter in the details, but those would need some very close examination.
Right. Okay. Thanks for that, Christian. Yeah.
Right, okay. I believe that is the end of the session for today. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. And thank you, Brian. Thank you, Christian, for the great presentation. After the session, we'll send off the recording of the session to everyone who couldn't attend and the attendees as well. Thanks so much for your time. Have a good day.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Ich würde dann einfach mal gucken,